Thank you for joining us for the second installment of our Tuition Benefit Summer Series. Today, we will be discussing Coordinator Operations. And with that, our Tuition Benefit Administrator, Logan Gowers, will take it from there. Go ahead, Logan.
Hello, friends. It's lovely to see you all. As you know, if you've met me, I am the tuition benefit administrator for the graduate school. Many of you have been emailing me already and already know my name. You may also recognize me from the registrar's office from the yesteryears. So I know many of you already, and for my new people, lovely to meet you as well. Always fun to put a name to a face and all that. Now we're going to be talking about coordinator operations today. A lot of the material that we're going over today is going to be similar to the stuff that you had during your training or the things you see pretty regularly throughout the year. Some of this may be reminder material. There will be some new material added in as we go through as well, of little things that might be changing or updating, just so you're aware as we move into this new academic year. All right, so these are kind of the big things we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the role of a tuition benefit coordinator. What are our expectations of you? We're going to talk a little bit about allocation. Where does this money come from? Where does it go? How it should be used? And then we'll also talk about entering the students, doing that both the traditional method and through XTPP. We'll talk about running reports and troubleshooting. We're going to talk about tuition billing very briefly, and then student registration requirements and petitions. So a lot of material to go over. I'm a bit of a fast talker, so I will try to keep it to a normal pace so everyone's catching what we're going through. But feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat, and we'll hopefully have a short Q&A section after we're done as well. So just as a reminder, these guidelines are available on our website. We update that as regularly as we need to, at least annually, with any sort of updates and information that we have going on, the new things or exciting things that we need to share with you. Also, it's just a great resource. If for some reason I am unavailable, like a student emails you at midnight and you need to find this information right away, these guidelines are there and available for you so you can find and review this information as needed. You can also download it as a PDF, which is one of those things that I find very handy. I'm one of those people. Now, what is a coordinator? Who are these people? It is the responsibility of each department to appoint someone as a tuition benefit coordinator. These are our primary contacts within that department for us to reach out to them with any tuition benefit concerns we find, and vice versa. They are very much that point of contact. Responsibilities include the timely entry of students, routinely running reports and reviewing those reports for errors, addressing any TBP department and student concerns on the behalf of your department, and liaising within your department to address and remedy errors and issues. So if something comes up in your department, it is our expectation you will be working with your department to get those remedies fixed. Now, as a note on that, you are the department liaison for our office. It's important to remember that as a coordinator, you are the one that we're going to be reaching out to first and foremost and always. So if one of your students comes to me with a question, will I answer it? Of course I will. I'm one of those people. I want to help. But I will also make sure that you are aware of the questions that are coming to me. I try not to just answer questions without letting my coordinators know, hey, one of your students reached out to me and this is something that they're having a concern over, just so that you're on the same page as we're moving forward. Additionally, we would prefer that most questions go through the coordinators first. I have had experiences already during this year where a faculty member will reach out to me directly, bypassing their coordinator for whatever reason. And when it gets back to the coordinator usually responds with, oh, I could have fixed that in 5 seconds. Like I knew how to fix that already. And so it just creates unnecessary weirdness and confusion. Sometimes faculty members don't know that, obviously, especially newer faculty members who haven't been in this process as long. But it would be helpful for you to remind your faculty members that you are that person. Additionally, if there are HR concerns such as payroll or job code issues that need to be updated or such, we expect you to work with the appropriate people within your department. We are servicing well over 100 departments on campus. There's no way I'm going to memorize everyone's HR contacts. I'm doing my best, but unfortunately I am only human. So I would very much encourage you to remember that part of your role as we're moving forward. Now, the entry of benefits part of your role is very easy. We are going to go over in detail how to do that step by step, but just kind of starting at the beginning. Entry portal opens 6 weeks prior to the first day of school. That has not changed. And that is the first day of this semester. So the first classes of that semester. Portal will remain open until campus census, generally about 3 weeks after the classes begin, giving you just about 9 weeks or so to do that entry. It is the department's responsibility to have your students entered in a timely manner. We send out reminders and things, and we do everything we can to help, but ultimately that entry does fall to you for each semester. And as a reminder, we do not do retroactive benefits. There's some lateness we will discuss and do what we can, but if you come to me the next semester and say, hey, I forgot to enter a student last semester, there's not a lot I'm going to be able to do to help you. And I would be more amazed if that happened anyway. Usually students notice if their tuition benefit hasn't gone through for a semester. They'll let you know. Now, allocation. Where does this money come from? Once upon a time, there was this belief that this was like an infinite monopoly money resource. There was just so much allocation to go around. And that's not actually the case. The process was just a little different then, as it was a smaller program. And so most people weren't reaching their allocation limits. Many of you already know that that's simply not the case anymore. We are very much hitting the time periods where allocation limits are always on people's minds. Those TBP dollars start at the top of the university and move down through colleges and departments. And those are really distributed by the deans of the colleges. They're the ones who, when they receive their amount, they decide how much each department is going to receive. So deans or designees can work with us to get that allocation money moved around in weird circumstances where Department A has a lot of need and Department B doesn't have as much need anymore. We can move some of that funds around, but I need to be working with the dean of your college to do that. And we always want to make sure it is for the appropriate reasons. Now, luckily, if you're ever curious about your allocation, it's found at the top of your reports. Pretty much any page you open in the tuition benefit portal, we have found a way to hide your allocation number somewhere in there, and it's pretty much always right at the top. The information there, for those who have been working in this for a while, you already know what all this data means, but I'm just going to go over it real quick, especially for my newer people who are still getting used to some of this. There is, of course, the term and the academic year as listed for whatever term that you have pulled up in your reports or on the portal. However, there are some other things such as the year target amount. That is the allocation amount that you have for the entire academic year. Good to keep in mind that that is the whole year, not just the semester. I do get some departments who get a little gung-ho in fall and may forget that they need to go for spring and summer as well. So always make sure you're planning for the whole year. Additionally, it will show you the number of students that were entered for the whole year. This includes repeated students. So if you enter 15 students for spring and 15 students, like the same 15 students for fall, it's going to show you a total of 30 because it's counting both of those or all those students twice. Now, additionally, there is the system that calculates the estimated use. When we're looking at estimated use, the system shoots for the moon every time. You'll be looking at it and being like, this student's only 50% tuition benefit. The estimated use, unfortunately, does not prorate for that at this time. And it is going to assume every student that you enter is going to be 100% tuition benefit, full 12 credit coverage. It's going for the maximum amount it must go for to try to make sure that we stay under allocation limits. We are in discussions with UIT to try to implement a way to get those 50 or 75% prorations, but that is not currently something that we anticipate happening very soon. Just letting you know that we are doing what we can to try to make that happen for you, to make your allocation processes a little easier. Now, the actual use indicates what is actually being pulled from your allocation for resident tuition and mandatory fees. This will generally be less than your estimated use just by the nature of the process. Not all of your students are going to be 100% TB. Not all of your students are going to go for 12 credits. And so generally you'll see your actual use be a little less than your estimated just by the nature of the process. It updates as much as possible in real time, meaning as your students are earning their assistantship wages, receiving their scholarships, etc., the system tries to update actual use to show, oh yeah, this student has earned enough to get their 100% TB. Boom, we'll update that actual use number. And so it does that as much as possible, but during earlier parts of the semester, you're going to see your actual use be a bit lower, and then it will start moving up closer to your estimated use as you get closer to the end of the semester. Estimated remaining is the difference between your year target amount and your estimated use. And so when you're looking at those numbers, that is where that calculation is coming from. Some of you may have encountered this many times before where as fall final calculations are happening and you're doing your spring entry, that estimated remaining number is kind of in flux and may not totally be accurate, especially as we're getting closer to final calculations. We understand that, and we're definitely willing to help wherever we can. If you reach out to us during spring when it's giving you those error messages of, hey, you're reaching your maximum amount, we'll take a look at that with you. And if we can see the math isn't working out correctly there, we'll definitely help in making sure you can get those last students for spring entered. Very normal. We anticipate that. However, that being said, it is still important that you budget for the entire academic year. We're in summer right now, and I've already had a few people reach out to me saying like, hey, we're having some weirdness with summer and allocation amounts. We're not sure what we're going to do with this X, Y, or Z scenario. It's really important to remember, if you're planning on any summer students or just planning for the whole year, you're keeping everything in mind. You want to look ahead at summer. You want to look ahead at what your totals are going to look like, if you're going to do any petitions, things like that, that may affect your allocation amounts moving forward. Now, allocation concerns over tuition benefit really should go to your dean if it is a concern of we just simply don't have enough. If it's that other scenario where we think the math's not working out, you can definitely reach out to me and I'll help check that and do what I can. But if the question at the end of the day is, I need more allocation money, my sympathies will always be with you, but I cannot give you more allocation money. I simply don't have that money myself. So that needs to go to the dean of your college, where you can kind of have that discussion and see, is there something that we can move around? Can we find funding for X TBP instead? Or is it a case where this semester may not work out, but we're going to plan for the future? We're going to plan for growth. My advice is to always plan for growth. You should always want and anticipate bringing in more students if you can, especially with considering the goals of the university moving towards higher enrollment numbers and more research and things like that. Now, this is what allocation covers. Allocation covers resident tuition and mandatory fees for the following students. We have our research assistants, who are GRs. We have our teaching assistants, TAs and GTs, and graduate fellows. These 4 types of students are going to pull from your allocation amount. As you're entering those students, you will see your allocation numbers adjust accordingly. Now, what's not charged to allocation? RAs. RAs are charged to the F&A returned overhead for their external project, and therefore they are not going to hit your allocation numbers. As you're entering those students, you'll definitely see that in action. It's just not going to adjust those numbers. XTPP is the same. Keep in mind, any type of student can be XTPP, TA, GT, GR, GF, RA, all of them. But those are charged to the chart field you provide at the time of entry. So instead of hitting your allocation at all, it's just going to go right to that chart field instead. Additionally, the non-resident tuition waivers. I did get a few questions about this throughout this last year, where there was some confusion about where that comes from. You don't need to worry about it as far as your allocation is concerned. That money is not coming from that place. Again, it is just the resident tuition and mandatory fees. Additionally, you will always get one student who asks about this. Charges outside of resident tuition and mandatory fees, as defined by the university as mandatory fees, such as differentials, student surcharges, etc., late fees, things like that. Those are not going to come out of the allocation, nor will tuition benefit cover them, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But you'll always get one student who thinks they're very clever and will be like, oh, but I have to pay this differential. Therefore, it is a mandatory fee. No, unfortunately, that is not a mandatory fee as defined by the university. So that's not covered by tuition benefit, nor will it come out of your allocation. Now, we have various different support types. As we mentioned before, we have our graduate research assistant, RAs. We have our graduate research focus students, which is GRs, graduate teaching assistant, TAs, and teaching focus, GTs. Many of you who have been working in this for a while already know the difference between these, but just as a reminder, our RAs are those 5,000 fund externally project ones. We have our GRs, which are our other research focused students and other numbered projects. We have our teaching assistants. These are the people working in a classroom in some capacity, generally teaching, but they could be doing other classroom associated activities. And then we have our GTs, which are international students who are moving into the TA track, but need to go through the ITAP program for one semester first. That ITAP program is a very helpful program in acclimating them to this process, especially to an American classroom. A Greek classroom is a very different classroom to an American classroom. We have different expectations. So that helps them acclimate to really find success as they move into teaching in that kind of environment. And then, of course, we have our graduate fellows, GF, and these two people are not on some sort of job record. These are students who are just getting funded to do their studies. And as such, no job requirements can be part of a GF student's, outcomes. We can't have them coming in to do office work for 2 hours during the week unless we also are supporting them as another type, so such as an RA or something. And even then, that work needs to be applicable to their studies. Now, students supported by assistantship, as you noticed, there were job codes on the previous slide. I don't expect anyone to generally memorize those. I am not good at memorizing those off the top of my head, even to this day, but you can always find them online. You can find those resources. It is important that those job codes are being used with the appropriate job types. If you have a student on the wrong job code, for one, their tuition benefit will just simply not work. And then additionally, it creates taxation problems and things like that we will want to avoid. It is especially important that if you have a student who is not being supported by tuition benefit or is just simply not a tuition benefit student at all, like if they're not even a graduate student and they're on that job code, that is incorrect and they need to be moved off of that job code to whatever is more appropriate. Wages will only count towards the tuition benefit minimum support if it's earned on the right job code and during the right pay periods. We'll talk a little bit more about that again in just a few slides, but it's important to remember the wages need to be earned during the correct semesters. Students can be supported in more than one classification. That is very common. It doesn't happen all the time, but we do see it. You see very commonly mixtures of RAs and GRs. You may have a student who's a TA for part of the time and then a GF for the rest of their support. You can see almost any type except for maybe TA and GT. I don't think I would see a circumstance where that would happen, but I'm willing to be surprised. GRs working outside of their academic department do need to be approved by us every academic year. That means that if they are working in biology, but they're actually a chemistry student, we need to have that approval go through us so that we can see why that is. The big thing we need to see is how does the job they're doing have a curricular connection to their studies? The reason for that being is that a lot of this program is regulated by various laws, and some of them require those curricular connections. So we need to see that the jobs they're doing apply. This goes back to they can't just be doing office work in the building unless that somehow applies to their studies. That petition does need to be sent to us every year. I don't need it every semester, just every academic year. And I do need that even if they're supported on XTPP. There sometimes can be a bit of confusion there because they think the funding is happening differently, therefore the rules are different. Not in this case. They need to still be approved by us. Students may be eligible for health insurance if they're on an assistantship. They have to be at the 100% level. So it's not my 75% or my 50% support students. They have to be 100% tuition benefit, and they cannot be a GF. No, it's only for my assistantship students, not for my fellowship students. Departments have to have a benefit allotment to cover the 100% premium, unless the student is being paid on the 1001 funds. As a reminder, this is different from previous semesters where it was just the 80% premium. We have moved to covering 100% of the premium for students. So we want to make sure that departments are planning ahead for that. As a reminder, the student support as we are looking at it now is as such. For summer, we're just looking at the $5,570 for 100% benefit. That of course goes up to $10,000 for fall and spring, and accordingly. We are seeing an increase in this, and we do anticipate increases in this every academic year, generally moving forward. This is something similar to a cost of living adjustment. We are wanting to make sure these students are getting properly covered for the work that they're doing, and so they can continue to live in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is a very expensive place to live right now. And all these numbers are, of course, finally approved by the university president's office, so everyone up and down the chain of command knows these numbers as we are moving forward. Now, entering a student. This is the easy part, especially for many of you who have been doing this for a while. You just go to your tuition benefit portal. That's just at cis.utah.edu and find the graduate tuition benefit portal. From there, you'll be brought to this homepage where you have home and reports. You can select home for the entry. It brings that up right away though. And you can just select your department. Make sure if you have access to multiple departments that you are selecting the appropriate department. It is not a great process to try to move students between departments. So if you have more than one, make sure you're on the right one as you're entering students. Now, you will select your department and it will bring up this information and the allocation information, as I mentioned before, just likes to show up everywhere. And then you'll select the Add Student option. When you select Add Student, it will bring up the following page where you can fill in that student information. You'll put in the student ID. This is an template format, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. You'll select whether or not they're going to be on extended tuition benefit by checking the extended box where appropriate. I'll talk a little bit more how that changes this process in just a second. And then the next thing that you'll enter is the support type percentage. This is generally where our first point of confusion comes in with the entry process, because we'll get a few people who will look at that and see, oh, I need to enter them for 75% because they're going to be 75% tuition benefit. That is not the case. In this place, you are just designating how much of each type of support they are. So if they're going to be a TA the entire semester with no other support types, the answer to that is 100% TA. If they're going to be a split between TA and GR, you would put 50-50 or 60-40 or whatever percentage is appropriate for the amount that you're trying to enter. It needs to equal up to 100% or the system is just not going to let you enter that student. Down below is the plan amount. The plan amount is where you will enter the anticipated support amount, how much you anticipate that they're going to earn or receive in your support. That will then work backwards to determine the tuition benefit amount. So for example, if they're going to be earning $10,000 as part of their assistantship wages, you would enter $10,000 into the plan amount. The system will then look at that $10,000 you've entered and go, oh, for fall, that is 100% tuition benefit. And it does that all on the back end. You just need to enter that number. Now, if they're going to be on health insurance, you'll mark the health insurance box accordingly, and then we will do the G-SHIP enrollments on our side as part of this process. So make sure that if they are going to be electing for that health insurance, you're marking that appropriately so that I can get them enrolled as soon as possible. Once you're done, you'll just hit save, and that will enter the student, and the next start of the process will start moving forward. If you are doing extended tuition benefit, the big change is that when you hit extended and start putting in your support type percentages, for example, in this case, 100% GR, you'll see that it also brings up a chart field box. This is where you will start entering those chart fields, which we do need at time of entry. I'm not really in a place where we can do those later, so it's best that you have those chart fields ready to go as you are entering students. You can do multiple chart fields if needed. So if you're doing 2 different chart fields, just make sure you hit the plus button, add the new chart field, and that you're designating the percentage that needs to be charged to each. Now, I've seen some really fun ones before. I've seen some circumstances where we have 5 and it's like 10, 10, 40, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever works best for you, you can do that. Just try to make sure you're keeping it all organized if you're getting some really fun ones. And of course, you can do different chart fields between different types. If the chart field for the GR is not the same as the GT, that's fine. Just make sure you're designating each as part of your entry in clear ways. Now, obviously, we want you to enter all of this as accurately as you can estimate. However, the world is weird, and sometimes we anticipate that weirdness. For example, it is very common for RA funding to change and fluctuate during a semester. Sometimes it just goes away entirely, and that student needs to be moved to a GR circumstance or something like that. We understand that, and we will help in every way we can if you have to make unanticipated changes in the middle of the semester. Just reach out to us, explain the situation to us, and we will do everything that we can to help. Now, as you enter each student, a few things start happening. One, every student you enter will start showing on that entry homepage. So you'll see their name, their unit, and then you'll see all the information you included, such as support type, support amount, whether they elected the health insurance or not, and then some extra helpful information, such as whether they have signed their agreement. Now, you don't really need to do anything about that agreement. Once you have entered the student, it sends them that email that says, hey, your department's doing tuition benefit with you. You're probably already aware because of a contract, et cetera, that they've sent you, but you need to sign this agreement. If they do not sign that agreement, they will never receive their tuition benefit. Additionally, after signing, it can take 1 to 2 business days for that process to go through. So while we'll see that they have signed, the tuition benefit may take a little bit more time to update. So if you have a student who's like, I signed my agreement this morning, where is my money? It's going to take a little bit longer. But you can see whether they've signed by a green check or a red X if they have not signed. Now, you'll also see update and delete, very helpful buttons, especially if you've entered the student as GF and then you look back over your notes, it's like, oh, they were supposed to be a GR. I'm so sorry. You go to update and you can do that change up until the portal closes. So a very easy process to do. Keep in mind, however, every time you do an update, the student does need to sign the agreement again. Additionally, there is the delete button, another very handy button if you are no longer planning to support a student at all. However, there is a word of caution to this. If you are deleting a student, please make sure that you really intend to delete the student. If you have a situation where you delete them and then add them back in again, the more times that happens, the more exponential the chance that something is going to go wrong with their tuition benefit. The system has some old data that it keeps for record keeping purposes, and the more deletions and adds that happen, the more likely it's going to break something along the line. So I would always suggest update if you just want to make a change, but only delete if you're absolutely certain you're no longer wanting to support the student. You can, of course, continue to add more students by setting the add student at the bottom or the top, as many as you need within your allocation limit. Now, running reports. This is another thing that's very helpful for you. It is the responsibility of your coordinator to run and review reports on a regular basis. We do everything we can to catch error messages on our sides as well, but again, we are servicing so many departments on campus that it is very important that you guys are running your reports as well. I depend on you in that way. Regular review ensures that errors are attended to and found as soon as possible. Nothing is more stressful for a student than all of a sudden seeing their tuition benefit disappear in the middle of the summer or semester, and they have no idea why. Looking at those reports early enough will help you catch those error messages, sometimes even before they notice their tuition benefit has gone away, and you can address problems accordingly and try to get that fixed so that that stress is a little less on the part of your students. Should any TBP adjacent responsibilities as part of running reports come up, however, such as EPAF processing, scholarship admin, etc., that lays within your department, and that is something you need to work with your department on. Again, I'm not going to contact your HR person if their EPAF needs to be updated. That's something that you need to work with your department on. Now, running reports, super duper easy. You just select the report option at the top of your page. And when you're there, it will ask you for the term and the department. It generally gives you about 5 terms of options. As a note, the further back you go, you might start seeing some weird error messages that no longer apply. For example, if you have a student who's no longer working that job, you may see a job code error that doesn't apply anymore in older reports. But the more recent reports should be working with the current and most accurate information. Additionally, if you need any reports older than 5 terms or so, let me know. I have magical abilities to pull those reports, and I am more than happy to provide you with older data. So just let me know what you need and I'll get that for you. But you select the term and your department. Again, make sure you're selecting the right one. And you can select submit or download. Download will provide you with an Excel spreadsheet, very helpful if you're like me and you love Excel spreadsheets and manipulating that data makes you feel good in your heart. That is there for you and you can totally do that. Or if you just want to see it in the browser, you can hit submit instead. Submit will provide you with the data that looks something like so. I have cut it apart and added some notes here, so obviously it's going to look a little different. But it will give you your allocation information at the top, and then as you go down, you will see students that you have entered. You'll also see them separated by RA students and ex-TBP students a bit lower, just because they're not hitting your allocation the same way, so they're separate in your report just for ease of your use. Now, you can go down and find students by their unit and then last name, first name, and then it will go across the screen with all of their report information. Something really helpful is underneath the unit and name, if you see messages, that more than likely means there's an error message of some kind that you need to review. Sometimes it's just an override, but that's very rare. So you will want to take a look, and if you see a message, you know immediately that's a student you want to look at for something. Some concern is happening there. But moving across, you can see, for example, with this student, they have a message of insufficient credit hours and TBP term count exceeded. Those are some pretty big error messages. So we're going to want to make sure the student's taking a look at those things. You can also see moving across that you have the percentage support types that you entered. The student was 100% GR. We can see the anticipated support amount that was entered. This is that plan amount that we saw earlier during entry. And we can also see the actual amount that they have earned so far, generally during an assistantship of some kind. And so we can see, oh, hey, this student was anticipated at 3950. Their actual was 7608. They've shot well above that. So great, they're definitely getting their TB. We feel confident. You can also see the FTE. As a reminder, FTE does need to remain below 0.74. If it goes above 0.74, they're considered a full-time employee and no longer eligible for tuition benefit. This does include pretty much every job that's available on campus, including the health side. We occasionally get some confused students who go and get a job at ARUP, like drawing blood or whatever it may be for the hospital, and they don't realize that's going to count towards this FTE and it causes problems. So we'll just want to make sure that FTE is staying below 0.74. Additionally, as you move across, you'll see the total of grad credits and the total credits that they are currently enrolled for that semester. Grad and total is kept separate. This is mostly for the purpose of the fact that while it's usually going to be the same number, 4 and 4 in this case, you do get the occasional grad student who's like, I'm going to take an undergraduate class. And so it'll be like 6 and 9. And so you can see where that separation lies on what is actually going to be covered. Because again, we generally only cover the grad credits. You can then move over to the next part and you can see their total tuition and the tuition that is currently being reduced by tuition benefit. This should match the benefit percentage that is below. So for example, the student has a total tuition of 2109, but their tuition reduction is 0. This is because of the error messages that we saw earlier. We see the benefit percentage is also 0. That's a problem. So we want to make sure that we're getting those error messages, looked at. The next thing you'll see here, it just says no. That designates whether they were a G-SHIP election or not. So you can find your G-SHIP students very quickly. And then additionally, you can see your total eligible terms and the number of terms that they have used under term count. So the total eligible will reflect according to whatever they came in with, whatever is appropriate. So for example, if you have a student who's coming in for a master's degree, they're going to have about those 4 terms. If they're coming in for a doctorate, they may have 8 or 10, depending on whether they're coming in with a master's from our institution or an outside institution. And additionally, have they used tuition benefit before? You'll see those count against the term count. So this gives you a good idea of how many terms does the student have left to use tuition benefit, or are we needing to maybe start considering extended tuition benefit instead? You can also see the cumulative hours that they have earned up to that point. This doesn't include current enrollment from what I understand. So you can get a good idea of, oh, this student is reaching this amount of hours, they're reaching close to the end of their program. Or if they're an RA student, how close are they to getting to that 84 credit hour rule problem that we want to keep an eye on? I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. And then finally, you can see whether they have signed their agreement and the date they have signed their agreement. Again, this is very helpful for that student who's like, I signed my agreement this morning, where is my money? Well, you can take a look at that. Yeah, you signed it this morning. It's going to take a second. Now, your most common error messages. What are the things that you're going to see most often? You're going to see things such as no RA Job 5000 fund. This means that they are an RA student, but at that moment, they do not have an active or accurate job record under an RA. Something in that job record is broken. Keep in mind that can be something about the 5000 fund part as well. So that's something you'll want to do some investigation on. You'll also see things like no TA job code. They were entered as a TA, but their TA job record is incorrect. So you want to make sure they're under the right job code number. They were actually entered as a TA and not as something else. You'll see insufficient credit hours. They are just not enrolled for enough credit hours that semester to get tuition benefit. As a reminder, fall and spring are 9 credits, where summer is 3 for the minimum. 84 hours exceeded. Again, this is for our students who are RAs and they have gone above that 84 credit hours, or even just hit that 84 credit hours. The moment they get to that number, that error will appear and will be a problem for your non-resident students. Your TBP term count exceeded. If this is a case where they have used all of their terms of tuition benefit and there is nothing left for them to use, well, you might want to consider X TBP. Do we need to do a petition? What's going on with the student? How do we help them moving forward? Then finally, you'll see override eligible. This actually only shows if we have already placed an override of some kind. So you will likely see either some other error messages or issues, and you'll then see override eligible if we have gone in and placed an override. This is generally only in the process of petitions or CDA accommodations or etc. So it's very rare that you'll actually see that message, but you'll know it when you see it now. Now, just as a reminder, tuition billing is actually assessed by the Office of Income Accounting. I have no hand other than the TB process in a student's bill. I have no idea why they're being charged X, Y, or Z amounts. I just know how our tuition benefit applies to it. It is important to remember, however, that students are always going to bill according to their residency status. So if they are a Utah resident, they will be billed as a Utah resident. If they are international or otherwise, they will be billed accordingly. With it can sometimes be confusing with students is that they will come into the program and be like, well, because I am on tuition benefit, I am being charged as a Utah resident, when they're actually being charged as non-resident. And the reason for that is that eligible domestic non-resident and international students have a non-tuition waiver applied where appropriate. So there is a bit of a confusion there, but if they actually go on their bill, they can see these all as separate items. They can see that they are being charged as non-resident, they have the non-resident tuition, and then they'll also see the non-resident waiver in place. So this is very helpful to remind your students, especially as they are, moving further and further in their program. If they're an RA on that 84 credit hour rule, they might suddenly have to pay for that non-resident portion of their bill because they misunderstood what is happening. So it's very important to remind them of these things as you're moving forward. As a reminder, dissertation credit billing is at a reduced rate. So if you're a PhD student and you're in a 7970 to 7989 course, your credits are actually going to be billed at a lower rate. It's generally about a third of what is normal. Tuition is, of course, assessed by course. So students in a mix of dissertation and regular coursework are going to have some weird, funky bills. This is why you can get one student who's at 9 credits and they have X amount, but you have another student at 9 credits and they're at Y amount. It could depend entirely on what did they enroll for, how much of that is dissertation, are they a PhD student? Your bills are going to fluctuate between students, and that is very much a feature of the University of Utah. So something important to remind your students who are coming from other institutions and seeing weirdness in their bills. Now, what does tuition benefit cover? What does it not cover? Tuition benefit will cover resident tuition up to 12 graduate credits. So while our minimum is 9 for during normal semesters, the max is 12, and up to 6 during summer. Now, we also cover the mandatory fees as we determined earlier, and we will make sure the non-resident waiver is applied where applicable and eligible. You'll notice that's it. That's a very short list. The list of things we do not cover is a little bit longer. And this is generally where some confusion will come in with students, especially if very casual wording has been used around them, like, oh, tuition benefit is going to cover 100% of my charges. Not necessarily. In fact, in most cases, no. Tuition benefit does not cover differential tuition, for example. Differential tuition is the responsibility of the student. Fees outside of mandatory fees, that's the responsibility of the student. Undergraduate courses, student. Repeated courses outside of those that we expect, that's going to be for the student as well. Now, if it's one we expect, like a thesis hour course, and they're going to take like 10 of that before they graduate, we know that. That's to be expected, and we'll make sure that's still covered. Graduate credits exceeding 12 credits, where I appreciate the gusto, but I'm not going to be able to cover that. Non-credit and continuing education courses, withdrawn courses, which is another University of Utah feature that a lot of students coming from other places may not understand. Audited courses, international student fees, and then again, that non-resident waiver for RAs who have reached 84 cumulative graduate credits. So the list of things we don't cover is actually a much longer list. And so your students who don't entirely understand what tuition benefit is doing will come to you with questions of, hey, I thought this was covering everything. Why do I still have this bill? And you can help them understand, hey, these are things that are not covered. Part of your bill is likely one of these items. Now, that 84 credit hour rule, students who are supported as RAs who reach 84 cumulative credits, and that is concurrent to the semester that they're in, so the moment they hit 84 credits, become responsible for the non-resident portion of their tuition. Now, if they're not a non-resident student, they're never going to see this as a problem because they're not getting charged like that. But if they are a non-resident student, all of a sudden they are going to see their bill become much larger than they were expecting. It is going to affect those students in all those cases. So you're going to want to make sure you're watching out for that. Additionally, there are some alternative ways to cover that problem. For example, if they are at 84 credit hours and they are almost done to graduate, they just need to take I need to just take thesis, defend my thesis, and get out of here. Well, if they enroll for 9 credits of thesis or dissertation, the 84 credit hour will be revoked and then they will be at the normal level again. We'll be charging them the same way. Now, departments choosing to cover the non-resident charges can also do so through scholarship admin. So let's say you're not that other student. You don't have that one thesis hour left. You actually need to take a class of some kind. Well, if your department can, then they can choose to cover your non-resident part through scholarship admin instead. So you have to decide where your students are, what's most appropriate for them, and on that other student's case, what are you willing as a department to help them cover through scholarship admin? Now, financial support requirements, if they're on an assistantship, those wages need to be earned during the proper semesters. I usually get one question every semester of, hey, we have X student coming from out of state. They came early. Can we start paying them now? Can I set them up with a job now and get that job rolling? Absolutely. I love that plan. Definitely pay them. Unfortunately, it will only count during the appropriate semesters and pay periods, however. So for example, if they arrive early for fall, and then they are starting on August 1st, well, everything August 1st through 15th is not going to count towards their fall tuition benefit. However, everything August 16th through December 31st will. So as long as you're not going to lose anything by starting them a bit early, sure, that's fine, you can do that. Just keep in mind how that is going to affect their pay periods and what's moving forward. Additionally, if they're on a fellowship of some kind, scholarship admin needs to be distributed during the correct term. Scholarships given during fall will not be eligible for spring tuition benefit, and stipends paid through AP need to also be dispersed during the appropriate semesters. Now, enrollment and registration requirements, most of these are pretty straightforward. Students participating in tuition benefit, including ex-TBP, need to meet the following requirements. They have to be matriculated. That one's easy. That just means degree seeking. That's pretty much everyone. In good academic standing with their program, so they can't be at a very low GPA or not meeting your expectations. And they need to be enrolled in a minimum of the 9 credits for fall or 3 for summer. We cannot distribute tuition benefit if pretty much any of those things are not happening. So if they are at a low GPA, their tuition benefit's not going to go through. If they're not enrolled for enough, their tuition benefit's not going to go through. So we want to make sure that these things are happening. Additionally, that 9 credit enrollment requirement, again, that is the minimum. We will cover up to 12. So that's the window of opportunity that they have. But however, it does not count for undergraduate or repeated courses. We are not going to cover those. One other, however, those courses can be used towards the 9 credit minimum. So you may see situations where a student is repeating a course because they got a pretty terrible grade the first time, but they're still TB eligible for everything else and their GPA is at just the right level. We will allow that repeated course to count towards the 9 credit minimum, but maybe if they're only enrolled for 9, we're only going to pay for the other 6 credits. That repeated 3 credit course, we're not going to be paying for that. So that's something important to keep in mind. You can use those in that way. As a reminder, repeated courses, we will only cover them if they're required by the degree program. Repeating them to improve a grade, we are not going to count that. We're not going to be paying for that course. Additionally, there is an academic year limit. This is the thing I've actually been seeing a lot just this week or so, as we are in summer currently, and a lot of people are hitting those limits. The academic year, as defined by fall, spring, and summer, beginning in fall, ending in summer. If a student is supported on tuition benefit for fall and spring, they'll get the full 24 credit or graduate credit hours that they can use through the whole year. as long as they're meeting the other enrollment minimum requirements as well. So our most common yield spread we'll see is like 9, and like maybe 6 or so. And so we get up to that 24. But your actual students will vary and fluctuate according to their enrollment needs. If a student is only supported for fall or spring, meaning only one of those semesters, then they actually only get 12 graduate credits to use during the year. And so we see situations where they might do 9 in fall and 3 in summer. Or if they do all 12 in fall, they're not going to have any more tuition benefit to use unless they are also doing spring. So it's very important to keep in mind that how many credits are they going to be able to use during the whole year. I have seen a few circumstances already this year where we have students who used all 24 credits early on during the whole year, and they get to summer and want more, and we just can't do that. So it's very important to keep that in mind. Enrollment accommodations. What if you have a student going through a CDA accommodation and they are allowed to enroll for less? Absolutely. We are 100% on board for honoring CDA accommodations. However, those need to come from CDA. I need to see that come from them directly. Generally, CDA is super good about this, however. If you are working with the student and they say, hey, I'm going through some CDA processes right now, you should let that student know, hey, while you're talking to them, tell them that you're on tuition benefit. Because if they know that they're on tuition benefit, CDA actually reaches out to us automatically and adds us as part of that conversation. And namely, when the student is approved for their CDA accommodation, they let us know right away, and we can put that override in place without any other problems or discussion. We're happy to honor that. However, we will not honor other accommodations that are granted without CDA approval. Accommodations for lesser enrollment, that's just done between the department and the student. That is only between the department and the student. We cannot honor that. Unless it's going through CDA, they have to meet the other enrollment requirements and registration requirements. Now, withdrawn courses. Again, this is something that's very specific to the University of Utah. In fact, most new University of Utah employees who first see the withdrawals are like, is there a difference? There is actually, and it is a bit of a fine difference. The big thing is that a course that is dropped before the add drop deadline is a dropped course. It is removed entirely from the record. No tuition is assessed, doesn't even show up on their transcript. Easy peasy, not a concern. That won't count towards TB, of course, so they're going to need to maybe add another class, but they're not on the hook for any tuition. However, classes that are attempted to be dropped after the add drop deadline are likely going to be in the withdraw window. Withdraws are allowed up until about the midpoint of the course. A withdrawn course receives a W grade. While a W grade does not positively or negatively affect GPA, it is a class that the student is still required to pay for. Additionally, in consideration with TB, withdrawn courses do not count towards the minimum enrollment, and we do not cover them as part of tuition benefit. This causes a lot of crazy headaches for students. They get unsure or they are surprised by this sudden bill that appears when they think they've dropped a class when they've actually withdrawn a course, especially on TB where they were having everything else or most of everything else covered by that point. So suddenly this bill appearing is very shocking to them. Keep in mind, again, that minimum amount. The withdraw doesn't count towards that. If they're at 12 credits and they withdraw down to 9, okay, their TB is probably not going to be affected. They're just going to have to pay for the withdrawn course. However, if they're at 9 credits and withdraw down to 6, well, they're no longer meeting the minimum enrollment requirement. All of their tuition benefit is going to go away. So you'll get students who will call you in a panic saying like, I withdrew from this course and now I have to pay for everything. What happened? What went wrong? You can explain to them, hey, this is probably what's happened. Let's pull up your registration. Let's take a look and see what you need to do to get that situation remedied. And I would always suggest if you have a student who comes to you in the middle of the semester saying, I'm going to drop a course, you should be like, are you actually going to drop it or are you going to withdraw it? Have you looked at the drop deadline? Do you know? Like, because sometimes they're just not even aware that this is a process that exists. So very important to remind your students of these things. Almost there, we got petitions next. Petitions may be submitted on behalf of a student by a department or a chair's designee. but we will not generally accept those directly from the student. In fact, if I get one from a student, I will generally turn directly to you, email you, and be like, why? What happened? Like, why are they submitting this to me? We're generally looking to get exceptions for personal emergencies, illness, extenuating family circumstances, crazy things that are beyond the student's control is generally my casual way of describing that. Now, as a reminder, most of our petitions are for extensions, but if you have a circumstance that we need some other type of petition, describe that to us, talk to us, we can look at what may be possible. Petitions for now need to be sent to our general inbox, that's tuitionbenefits@gradschool.utah.edu. However, just as a fun note, we are working on a new portal for petition submissions to be put on the website, so that all of that will go through the website, similar to the COVID petitions that are now being wrapped into our other petition types. So once that goes live, we'll send out notice with instructions and things like that, but something to look forward to, one less paper trail to worry about in that regard. Now, to be eligible for a petition, a student has to meet the following requirements. They have to be in good standing for their academic program. They have to have the formation of a committee. They have to have grad student degree tracking as up to date as possible, including program of student study entry approved by that committee. They need to have qualifying exams completed. They need to have any other milestones that are required for the degree really done. Essentially, in short terms, they need to be pretty much done. What we're generally looking for, especially with extension petitions, are, hey, this student was on track, everything was going great. We need one more semester because an unkind or weird thing has happened that nobody could have expected. We don't want to punish a student for something outside of their control. But additionally, we need to see that that is the circumstance. We're not going to be giving extension petitions for no reason. If a tuition benefit extension is granted, it is also important to remember that you as the department are still responsible for that student. You still need to provide the minimum support through an assistantship or a fellowship. You still need to have allocation to support that student. That student is still your responsibility as part of this process. We do not take on those costs for that student. Now, what's going to happen if a petition isn't possible, or maybe you're just looking for an alternative to a petition so that you don't need to go through the petition process with the student? XTBP is a great option, especially if they're an RA student that's already coming out of that F&A return to overhead and not hitting your allocation. Moving that to XTBP is very easy. The use of departmental funds. This is kind of what I call the searching under the couch cushions for every quarter we can find option, where if we have other funds that we can move around or use as part of XTBP, that's a great option. And then if none of those other options are available, maybe a student can just register for the smallest amount they need. They need 1 credit just to do their dissertation and get out of here, do their dissertation defense. Cool, they do that 1 credit, and then you choose as a department to cover that through scholarship admin. If you want to. Again, this is entirely at your discretion. Also keep in mind, for some students, their minimum is going to be a bit more than 1. Sometimes in visa situations, student loan situations, or for health insurance, they have to enroll for at least 3 or more in some cases. So very important to keep in mind. And that's all. That's my whole presentation. Just as a reminder, some upcoming workshops before we get to our Q&A section. We have June 2nd, we have the TBP and enrollment management. June 6th, I will be running GShip overview. Very fun. I hope to see you there. July 6th, we're also going to be doing a TBP fall prep Q&A. And then we also have our graduate school funding opportunities. So excellent opportunities for workshops ahead. Definitely hope to see you all there. But let's go ahead and jump into the questions part. As a reminder, if you don't want to ask a question here, don't want to feel comfortable raising your hand, you can either wait a little bit later, put it in the chat, or you can email us any of the information provided here. Again, a copy of this presentation, both the slides and the video, will be on the Coordinator Resources website within the next few days. But I think with that, we'll go ahead and open to any questions for those who want to raise their hands.